So, do you find yourself at the beginning of each year, or maybe throughout the school year, having to fight for your child to be included? Well, you are in the right place today because we are going to be talking about the values of inclusion and why we need to make sure that not only the teachers and the staff in the school, but people in our communities see the value that our children have. But having those values isn't going to get us as far. We also need a roadmap of strategies and research based practice to help us get to inclusion. So, we are in for a treat today because we have a special guest, and she is going to be helping us share and help others understand the values that our children have. She is also going to be talking about the importance of setting high standards. And I think of that as both as parents and school staff, that we want to make sure we all have high expectations for our children. The importance of helping teachers know that when they use research-based instructional strategies, that it's going to benefit all the students in the classroom. And also, we're going to talk just a touch also about planning for our child's future. So if you are new to our show, I am Charmaine Tanner. I'm a retired teacher. I'm a parent of a son who just turned 31 and happens to have Down syndrome. And also now I'm a full-time advocate for other families. So I welcome you to our weekly show. As I said, today we are lucky because we have a special guest with us. And here we have Michelle. And Michelle, so your last name is Tetchner, right?
Exactly, Tetchner.
And Michelle, you may know as an author, and she has authored this book, Fully Included, Stories to Inspire Inclusion. She actually co-authored it with her husband. And today we're going to be giving 2 copies away of her book, so stay tuned for that. And you also might know Michelle as an administrator on the Facebook page, 100% Inclusion for, I want to make sure I get this right, the name of it, 100% Inclusion for Individuals with Special Educational Needs. So that's a really popular Facebook page. And if you don't like or follow that now, I encourage you to do that. Michelle also is a mother of 3 children, and her youngest son, Raymond, happens to have Down syndrome, and he is a high school student. So if you are a parent of a young child, I think you will benefit a lot from Michelle's experiences of raising and being an advocate for inclusion. If you are a parent of an older child, this is a perfect place for you to be too, if you have specific questions on what it's like in high school and what the inclusion can look like at that level. So I want to welcome Michelle. The other thing I was going to tell folks is if you're watching live or on the replay, and if you'd like some additional resources about inclusion, you can just let me know in the comments. I do have a handout that I can give you, which talks about 7 different ways to break down the barriers of inclusion. And so just let us know in the comments. But welcome, Michelle. And what would you like to add so we all get to know you a little bit better?
Thank you. Thanks for having me, first of all. Always have been a fan for a long time, so thank you. I'm very honored to be here. Yeah, I have 3 boys. The older 2 are 20, soon to be 29, 25, and then Raymond just turned 17. So it goes by so fast. Yeah, so just jumping in, we wrote the book mostly because I had heard so many stories about someone in New York who was doing inclusion. We were doing inclusion in Arizona, someone in California, and we just wanted a place where we could, get them all together, put them in a bundle, We threw in some resources, we threw in some IEP information, and we just wanted to be able to say, here, use this as a guide, use this just as a jumping point to start. So that was our theme and our goal.
Yes, and Michelle and I were talking about her book before we went on, and what I was saying is it's so nice because there are such a variety of stories in here from different families, and like Michelle said, around the country. And so it's one of those books that you can pick up and read a couple of the stories and not feel like you have to go from the beginning to the end. And when you want some resources, you can also go to that chapter, and they've got some great resources in here for parents about inclusion. So I think it's one of those books that you want to have in your library. And I also know parents that will buy copies of it and give to teachers or other people. And it really helps share those stories of how kids can be included, and it can be a successful experience, right, for all kids. So Daisy is here with us. I want to say welcome to Daisy. And I know Karen's excited about our show today. Please feel free to post comments throughout the show, even if you're watching the replay, because we can come back and answer those questions. So, Michelle, I don't know if it would be helpful for you to take us back when Raymond was younger, and how did you first, were there, speakers that you heard talk about inclusion, or what was it a long time ago when your son was younger that kind of got you on this road of this is what we want for our son?
Yeah, so when we were in Arizona, we were at elementary school and had an amazing principal. Sometimes you don't necessarily know who those people are that are behind the scenes who are rooting for you. But when push came to shove, she's totally stepped up. And so Raymond had a great pre-K experience. We moved on to kindergarten. One of the things that I always suggest is I always think of building a foundation as a pyramid. And so we redid kindergarten 2 times to build that foundation, and then he could grow up from there. And our principal was 100% behind that. And so that was a great tool for us to use. Then we got to 4th grade and we moved over to California briefly. And that was right after the market had crashed and San Diego was a mess. And so we went back to Arizona because we knew what we had and tried to grow from there. Our principal retired shortly after. And so that's when we started looking at private Catholic school. And so I have both sides of the coin. So it's kind of nice to have both experiences. So going back to elementary school, we did switch schools, and I did get talked into switching and doing the co-teaching modeling, and that lasted for about 2 weeks. And I was like, no way. And so it was a mess, and we left and we went to due process almost, and a whole bunch of stuff. So we've been all over that journey. So, and I'm always glad to help lend, support to those parents who believe in full inclusion, because it is totally worth it. So.
Right. So when, I think when you mentioned about having that principal that was such a supporter and trying to find allies in the schools seemed like it's such a critical element of, how successful your child's going to be included. And, sometimes it can be the school secretary that's going to be an ally. Sometimes it's the general ed teacher that, we can really collaborate with. But so do you have any specific tips on how do we share that value of belonging with teachers, and how do we get them to understand that, that sense of belonging and how important that is?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it's teaching them about your child. And so I remember going into an IEP meeting, and my son Raymond is very talkative at home. He never shuts up. And so he's either singing or talking. At school, he does not talk. And so it took us a while to figure out that he holds that as his own tool, as his own power. And so he wasn't talking at school at all. And then we got a good teacher, and then he would start to talk a little bit more. And so, again, going back to that pyramid, when he's comfortable, he could go up, he could jump. But unless he had it, he wouldn't do it.
Right.
And so that was at the IEP meeting, sorry. I told them about how much he talks at home. I showed them a short video of him singing and dancing. At the time, it was to Barney, which we all had a long relationship with. And they were like, wow, we had no idea.
Yeah.
And they don't. You know, they're only with our kids a couple hours a day, and we think they think they know them, and a lot of times they don't. So that's why you have to give them examples of what you do outside of your house. Where do you go as a family? What are their passions? And what's their currency? What do they like, in order to give them rewards and do positive behaviors? And so it all leads to that.
Yes. So, and I think, you hit that, right square on the head, right? As far as it's going to come from when people know our kids better. And when they know them as that whole person. So if you are here with us live or in the replay, if you can type in, what are some of the ways that you have found to be really helpful to help teachers get to know your child? I know a lot of parents will put together, like a one-page about me that you can pass out, that people can refer to later. I think your idea of showing short video clips at IEP meetings are really helpful, because you do want them to understand that, there is this whole wonderful, unique person, and that we want them to see them in other places and not just what it looks like when they're in the classroom,
For sure.
Yeah, I'm sure that that makes a difference. And the other thing I think about too, as our kids get older, is identifying students, classmates that they have a relationship with, and also bringing in the peers to help, facilitate things. I know in 5th grade, when our son was doing a first map session and preparing for going to middle school, we had friends come and be a part of that meeting. And it made such a huge difference to hear their voice at the meetings. And then you can also do, things like requests that, some of your child's friends are going to be in their class the following year. And that can help kind of bridge and help that new teacher, right? But I'd love to see some ideas that you guys have. Angela is with us, and she said, hi, Charmaine, Michelle, and Sandra. Was about to remind you to mention the 100% inclusion group. Was just delighted to meet you at the RMR. Thank you for leading with advocacy and information for those of us following behind you. These forums are important to really use together, is the common purpose. So thanks, Angela, for being here. And I think that's true, right? And, sometimes I'll use the analogy that us as older parents or parents of older children, that, that we can be seen as trailblazers. But what I often want to remind young parents of is that trail grows back very fast.
Yeah.
Unless we keep having more families and younger families advocating for our children to be included, it really, our efforts that we have, done, and Michelle and I, as far as 20, whatever, 15 years ago, people are still having to fight those same initial battles. And so it just proves to us that this is something that we have to really be persistent with in order to create that change. But let's talk a little bit about high standards, high expectations. So how do we, as parents, maybe look first at as parents, how do we have high expectations for our children? And then also, if you could talk about the high expectations at school that we need to make sure is there.
Yeah, one of the things that we were really super blessed with is that we were always at our home school. So we never had a special ed classroom. So a lot of times parents are at a school where there's that classroom and everyone's like, let's just put him there. Why shouldn't he go there? That was never an issue for us. And so we were like, nope, this is where we're staying. We belong with our neighbors. We belong in the community. This is where he's going to grow up. This is what we want. And so that was definitely a blessing for us. But I think when you tell them that they need to presume competence, that's a huge factor. And I love telling the story. I remember having this argument with this older gentleman who was a teacher in 4th grade teaching social studies. And he said, look at him. He doesn't understand this. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, because he's just looking at it. And I said, I broke it down for him and I said, every paragraph is written in a specific way. The beginning sentence covers, the highlights the entire next part of the paragraph. And what we were talking about at the time was Christopher Columbus. And so the beginning sentence was, Christopher Columbus sailed across the ocean with his 3 ships and they named them. And then further into the paragraph was the details of the 3 ships. And he said, he's not understanding any of this. And so I said, don't assume that he's not. And so fast forward to Christmas, and we were in Arizona at the time. And so we were driving over to San Diego, and my California people will know that down at the marina is this old time, big, huge boat that looks like Christopher Columbus's ship. And he says, hey mom, there's Chris's boat. And I said, what? Chris, and who has a boat that big? And we drove right past it, and it hit me that he remembered that. So I think we have to be really conscious of we know that it's going in, but just because it doesn't come out in a testable, timely manner doesn't mean that it didn't get in there. So definitely let's presume competence.
Yes. And that's, I think, so important because, we want teachers to also understand that there's a variety of ways that our kids can show what they've learned, right?
Yeah.
And, by having the alternatives, like having an oral test, I know in high school, my son in this sociology class, he had a teacher that would just pull out the main points and just do a conversation and kind of an oral exam with Dylan. And so there are other ways, and I don't know, I always kind of use the analogy of soaking things up and being a sponge, and it may not look like some students are paying attention, or you look at students on the spectrum and how making eye contact is really hard for them. So we can't expect that, they're going to look at us and, make eye contact and tell us exactly what we're asking. But there are other ways that we can tap into what our kids know.
And I always say I want the Cliff Notes version. And I know that kind of dates us. So we all remember those yellow books, and we've taken novels from different grades. And Raymond has always been on the general ed curriculum. So if they're reading the book, the aide or myself will modify it. And if it's a 10-page chapter, we're going to pull out the 3 highlights for that chapter, move on to the next chapter. So I always try to think of it like I could absolutely take a political science class. I would need help with it, but it doesn't mean that I shouldn't have access to it if I choose to. It doesn't mean that I can't, but I need some tools and I need some help. So it's the same thing. So we just need to be better at reducing the work and making those accommodations that are needed.
Right. And that's what I think is so nice, is that once teachers do it for your child that's on an IEP,
Yeah,
then
exactly.
hopefully they see, aha, this could be something that would benefit other kids in my class too, right?
There's always that 10% in the class that need just as much help as your child does. So don't ever feel guilty. I talked to a parent yesterday and was like, I feel like the parents say my child is too distracting. And I said, you're bringing an aide into that classroom. You're bringing an extra adult into that classroom. Your teacher is going to become a better teacher because she's going to look for visuals. She's going to look at a different way to teach that same material. So don't you dare feel guilty, because it benefits everybody and it raises the scores for those other typical kids. So
Right, right. Yeah. So I think when we look at helping teachers understand that even though we're asking them to do something different, that it's not just for one student in their class. It's really going to impact the other students. And then I think sometimes teachers are more willing to try, a variety of things. So let's see. I also was going to bring up another comment here from Maggie. And she said that her daughter is in kindergarten and that she started emailing the team every Sunday or Monday with pictures and videos of what they did over the weekend. And she said they use them as conversation starters for the team so they know what they did over the weekend, but it also serves as a way for them to get to know her outside of the classroom. So, yeah, so that's really cool to, be able to do that on a regular basis.
yeah. And actually I just sent it doesn't matter how old the child is, right? Raymond's taking a food science class, and obviously it's going to involve cutting and measuring and stuff. And the teacher was worried, which I appreciate. He was worried about him cutting. So Raymond and I were making apple crisp, and I've told him he knows how to cut, but it doesn't matter. He's so fearful and that is the bottom line, is he's worried, and he's and I appreciate that, especially where knives are concerned. I sent him over a quick video of Raymond cutting up apples, and I showed him how he was worried about the deeper cuts, but the small ones were no problem whatsoever. And he was like, wow, this is hugely helpful. So it is, to show them the skills that they have, and outside of the house, exactly. It's perfect.
Right, right. And that's the thing that's so nice now with like cell phones. I mean, we can just take this quick, at the moment video, but it's a wonderful teaching tool that that parents can use. And then let's see. Michelle had a question as far as when somebody was saying that they met you at the RMR.
The Rockley Moms, the DSDN that was in Nashville this past year. And
Right.
I met a lot of young moms, and it was awesome to meet them. So.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. And I have some friends from Idaho that were there and just are looking forward to it being in Denver next year.
Exactly. It's quite an event.
Yes. And then let's see. I was seeing if we had. So Marla's with us. Hey, Marla. And she said, did you struggle to get services from a therapy perspective for Raymond?
Well, in public, we didn't struggle to get the services, but we did struggle to find a good therapist. And I think that that's always an ebb and flow of it all. Is we had a speech therapist that comes to mind, and she liked Raymond, and they got along fine, but she didn't know what to do. And so we had to use our outside therapist to write us goals for the school therapist. So we didn't have any struggles getting the services, but finding a really good person and knowing what to work on is always an issue as well. But of course, in private, we don't have therapies, and that is absolutely one of the downfalls of private. So.
Right. And if people have questions about looking at private schools for your child, that's something else that we can talk about today if you want. As Michelle had said, they advocated for Raymond to be included in Catholic school. And we are seeing more and more Catholic schools around the country that are opening the doors and welcoming children with disabilities. So if that's something that you're interested in, let us know too, because we want to make sure that there are a variety of options for our kids. And I know some parents have found wonderful charter schools,
Yeah.
which are still public schools, but sometimes you find, a better match for the staff and for your child if you look at something beyond your neighborhood school. So that's always an option for families too.
For us, it has been a huge blessing. But I would say mostly that when we met with the principal at our private school, her question to us was, will he fit in? And that is a completely different mindset than the public schools, who are worried about, they're just so worried. The Catholic school was, will he fit in? Will the kids, love and accept him? And that's an easy yes. So it's a different, both have their challenges, don't get me wrong, but it's really nice. So
Right. And so are there specific resources that you have found really helpful to give to teachers to say, this is another way of looking at things? I mean, do you find giving them articles or suggesting books, or how do you help teachers, kind of carry on that training and that professional development that they need sometimes?
For the first thing that comes to my mind would be, you talked about an All About Me. I definitely would suggest, kindergarten and first grade are kind of iffy, but any grade above that, a presentation at the beginning of the year, I would say is mandatory. If you haven't done it yet this year, I really suggest that you do. Because the teacher learns a lot from it. And then of course the kids learn so much. And I think that as human beings, if we don't have answers, we kind of fill in our own blanks. And so when you give those kids the facts of what he can do and what he can't do, and go into chromosomes a little bit, and we always play that Just Like You video that is like 13 minutes long. And then we have Raymond in the room with us. We have him leave for the question and answer portion, because I want those kids to feel safe and heard when they're asking questions. And trust me, we've had painful questions. They've brought up the R word. I would rather have that teaching moment than them to walk out and not have gotten everything that they could have. So
Right. And I guess when I look back on when Dylan was younger, I always kind of wondered how to approach that, because one of the things that I was kind of concerned about is if we made this, special presentation about Dylan, that would set him apart. Or, then the other part was like, if your classroom teacher has like a star student of the week, where every student gets a chance to kind of shine and encourage parents to, bring in or show things about their child. And then I get the other conflict that I had when Dylan was younger also was wanting to emphasize how he was so much alike, right? Which I think is really important.
Yeah.
But now as Dylan has become older, and I just like my thinking hasn't evolved, I guess. The other part that I think is really important is for our kids to recognize that their differences are not something to be like ashamed of, or this topic that's taboo and we're not going to talk about it. But it is something, like you said, when they know the facts, when they understand, and when they see, it's not like despite the differences, our kids are wonderful, but it's because of the differences, our kids are wonderful.
Right, and it's easy to shift that conversation to disabilities in general, which that short video definitely does. And it talks a lot about Down syndrome, but it talks a lot about disabilities in general. But I would also say, following it up, talking about commonalities. That's definitely got to talk about that. And the other important piece that a lot of people don't do is send something home to the parents. So just a quick handout for the kids to take home so that the kids can tell their parents about it, and that the parents have your cell phone number to reach out to you to say, we want to do play dates, we want to do include us, and Raymond's birthday is in October, and so we've been really lucky to we always do a class party. And so when we're doing that class party, you can watch and see which kids are going to be drawn to your son or daughter. And then you can start to develop those friendships, which makes it a lot easier. So.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent tip, is to share your cell phone information with the family so they do have a way to connect. Because, if you're a parent that can't be at, the end of the day, and you need to, be at work or whatever, and you're not seeing parents outside, the building or whatever, and having that time to chit chat, you want to have a way that they can connect with you. And that's right. Just like teachers, once they get to know our kids, that fear kind of fades and they understand. Just like other students, their classmates, their parents, they probably have questions too, that they want to bring in.
That reminds me too of what you had said is the child knowing that they are different. And I remember going to see Sue Buckley at a conference years ago when she was in LA. And she specifically said that every child needs to know their disability and be able to talk about it by age 9. And at the time, Raymond was, I think, 11. And I was like, oh, I haven't had that conversation. Now I feel bad. And the mom next to me was like, oh no, I'm not having that conversation. She'll use that as an excuse. And I was like, so funny. But I think that the way Sue Buckley said it was that child needs to have it in order to know that they're different, know that they aren't going to match with everybody else. And that can really affect their self-esteem, which I don't think that we always take into consideration.
Right.
We need to have high expectations of our kids, but they also need to self-advocate and say, I need breaks, I need help, all of those kinds of things too, and empower them. So I think that's super important.
Yes. And as our kids get older, then that understanding of their disability and how it impacts them, but also how it gives them strengths, is really important. So, especially if they want to go on to college and they need to be advocating for themselves more in a college setting, that makes a huge difference. I know when Dylan was going to the University of Colorado to audit classes, he was saying, but Mom, who's going to make my modifications? So we had to have a discussion about modifications, and that's not going to happen unless Mom and Dad probably do it for college. Right. But yeah, and I think, that's part of that self-advocacy that we want our kids to be able to say. I remember on my IEP, I'm supposed to have extra time for my homework, and just to do those gentle kind of reminders of what needs to be happening at school.
And I think you bring up a good point about college. So when you're talking at your IEP meeting and you have that team in front of you, you need to bring up college. You need to say what your expectations are of your child. You need to say, I want them to live independently. I want them to be able to take the bus to work. I want them to be able to punch in the clock. I want them to read the employee bulletin. I want them to be able to cook at home and read the recipes. So yes, I need fractions. Yes, I need time because he needs to look at the timetables for the bus schedule. So when you're inputting all of those different ideas of what your life looks like as a young adult, it kind of changes the teacher's perspective. And all of a sudden they realize, wow, I need to raise my expectations. So that'd be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And, we need to start looking, and it's not like any of our kids, with disabilities or without disabilities necessarily know what they want to do in life at age 14 or age 16. But we want to make sure that we keep those options open. And so, I think if we look at if we want our kids to be included after high school, after, they leave, the education system, we need to be making sure that we're infusing that inclusion throughout their schooling and in the community events. So I don't know if you have, tips for parents to, besides the school setting, looking at, park and rec activities or other, after school clubs. I don't know if Raymond is involved in any of those kinds of activities.
We do some GG stuff for sure. We love GGs. Our GGs here in Annapolis is fantastic about including, whenever there's a Teamtastic, there is another group of neurotypical kids there as well.
Cool.
Annapolis is great. They have like 4 big high schools, and all of them rotate through and do activities for the kids. And so I think that that's twofold, like you spoke to earlier. Our kids have to be around typical kids. They need their rich language. They need to watch their social cues. But the bigger picture is that those kids need to be around all kids. Because when they grow up, they are going to be the doctors and the nurses, and they have to be comfortable with our kids. They're going to be the employers and the employees that our kids are going to be working next to. They're going to be interviewing our kids. They're going to be around them. And kids with disabilities aren't going away. And so we're only doing them a favor by letting them be exposed to our kids and be comfortable with them. And honestly, our kids are so cool, We all have such talents and gifts. And when you can shift that narrative at the IEP table to, let's not look at what he can't do, let's find out what he can do and build from there. It's a completely different thought process. So right. You just gotta flip that narrative. So
yeah, for sure. And Daisy has a good question. She says that they've been pre-teaching as an accommodation. And what's a good way to find out if that is happening at school? When I ask the teachers questions, they seem defensive.
One of the best things we did was write into our IEP that the gen ed teacher and the special ed teacher met for 15 minutes every week. And so it only actually happened for the first, like a little past the first quarter, but it gave the general ed teacher the confidence to start to do the modifications herself. But it also, she was able to ask the questions she needed to ask from that special ed teacher. But then she was able to know what resources and tools she needed to make it happen from then. So I definitely would write that in as a goal. Because the more you can give them, the more information, the more confidence they're going to gain. And again, when people feel defensive, it's that they don't know and that they're worried. And so if you can kind of come at that discussion with a different frame of mind, then that might help too.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. And Michelle says that her daughter is 10. She's working on 3-way exchanges. She doesn't have friends outside of school, but they've implemented a lunch pizza party one time a month. And the social worker and her talk with the kids about the funny part to help kids hear, understand her daughter, Lucy. She said she's curious how other families initiate friend opportunities with kids who have fewer verbal and social skills. She said she also does a presentation each year focusing on how they are alike and what she can offer, what her daughter can offer them. So yeah, as far as friendships, so what are some ways that you have seen maybe yourself or other families facilitate friendships?
For us, Raymond loves theater. And so we found some girls that like theater as much as he did, and we would all go to a show together. And it was only like 1 year. One time was 3 young girls. This was probably 4th grade. And they were so excited to go to the show. And then Raymond was just as excited as they were. And again, building those commonalities and finding out what they like about each other is the start of every single friendship. And so Raymond loves to sing musical songs and stuff like that, and Disney musicals. So once you can build on what they like, it was fantastic. So sometimes a local one, sometimes we go to the big city ones. So basketball games, sporting events, whatever you can find, whoever you can find those commonalities and go with it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've tried to help parents look for too is to find things that are already there because, it seems like sometimes people then want to create this special theater group or this special, sports team or something. But it's like finding in your community and your school what clubs, what activities, even in elementary school, they'll have like intramural sports or things after, school gets out, and tapping into those, because then it's going to be an inclusive setting versus finding or forming something special and then inviting a few typical kids to join. So that would be one thing. I also want to remind people, if you want to get our handout that I have about reducing the barriers to inclusion, if you can just type in the chat box the word barriers, and then hopefully my IEP chatbot will respond to you and you'll get set up to get that handout. It's real practical tips on how you can reduce some of those barriers. So the other thing is, let's see if we have some, I think we've got some other comments coming in. I know Michelle said that it's empowering and can help them develop pride. Yes, yes. And that
yes,
is so important, right? Marla had a question. She said, I would love to hear about how Michelle advocated for Raymond for a private Catholic school.
It was a journey. We went to 4 different schools in Phoenix and we were told no. So we found a 5th one and the principal said she would meet with us. And we went in and sat down with her and we said very specifically, we want to be honest and open and transparent as a team and with each other about what our goals are and what her expectations were of us as parents. I will add that in Arizona, we had school choice. And so that was a huge gift for sure, because it paid for our aid and the tuition. That's not the case here in Maryland. But I think that's with any team, you need to be honest and open and transparent. And I always say very clearly, there are going to be bumps in the road. This isn't going to be a smooth journey. And let's be on top of it and let's be working through this stuff as it happens so it doesn't become a mountain that we can't get over. Because the bumps will always catch you off guard, but it doesn't mean that they can't be worked through, for sure. For example, Raymond already got a detention this year. Their words were, what have you done for detention in the past? And I said, we have never had detention because we work from a positive reward system. We try not to discipline after the fact. We need to work forward and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And so it's a mind shift. It's a growth mindset. There, like that's where you take those bumps and you get over them and you grow. So
right. And I remember when my son was in elementary school and he was threatening to throw rocks at other kids and he had to go to the principal's office. And I think at a young age, Dylan almost felt like I'm just a regular kid and I have to go to the principal's office. And he kind of saw that as like, they're treating me like everybody else, And so for him, it was almost like, this is good because they do have the same expectations. But we did have a talk about going to the principal's office is not exactly what you want to be.
As long as you're going to make sure that it's meaningful and relevant to, absolutely. You do what you need to do. But you need to break it down. You need to make sure that he understands it, and that it's not just a waste of time, for him, whoever's sitting there with him.
I know. And let me look, because I saw another one. Oh, so Angela said that she uses a teacher team info binder that expands on the About Me concept. And she said this was inspired by Sandra's blog on the topic and how she loves it. So I'm not familiar with that blog. So Michelle, if you can add some other
I don't remember the About Me concept, but I love the About Me, and I really like Maggie's comment about the Sunday night, Monday night emails to the teachers. Especially, I haven't been very good about it, but it is absolutely something we've done in the past. Like if we go to a sporting event that he's super excited about, then I try to make sure to tell them, especially if it's big events, like it's his birthday, it's his brother's birthday. If it's stuff that he's going to be talking about and want to talk about, like the concert that we're going to this weekend, everybody knows that we're going to Connecticut and that we are going to the C. Morelli all girls concert this weekend. Trust me. So, for him to say C. Morelli isn't going to come out clearly. So we needed to make sure that they knew what he was talking about, because it's so frustrating. I think we forget how brave our kids are. Every single day they go to school, and a lot of times they're not understood, and they just show up and they leave it all there. And so I just think it's amazing. So give them some credit once in a while. I think the teachers do too. I don't know that they understand how hard our kids work.
Right. And when you look at, sharing activities that happened over the weekend, I know that some speech therapists will give parents ideas of, if you went to a movie, bring the movie stub in, or, if you have a picture of your child outside the movie theater. And so your child, if it's like their show and tell time or whatever, and because I say, my son has this Down syndrome accent, and so not everyone understands that. But if they have some visuals that they can take to class and actually show, and then people understand the context of what they're talking about. So having those physical objects that they can bring in can be really empowering for them to share with their friends, And
it's finding those commonalities again, too. People know what you're doing outside of school.
Right. So let me see. I want to make sure I don't miss anybody's comments here. And Daisy said that she's given the teachers a one-page About Me and that they enjoyed reading it. And I think that could easily be something that, Michelle, when you were talking about sending home information to the parents, that About Me could be a great tool to share with other parents too, right? So Michelle said that she missed the inclusion group piece. She'd love to hear more. So I think maybe she's talking about the Facebook group that you are involved in. So do you want to talk about the Facebook group?
Yeah, it's the 100% inclusion page. It's awesome. There's a lot of people on there that are happy to help. That's what's so cool about it. And there are some experts on there. Sorry, no names are coming to my head.
It's fine.
But I love it because sometimes people will reach out to me privately, and I'll just say, just put it on there. If you have a piece of homework that you don't know how to modify, take a picture of the worksheet, put it on there, and then I'll give you my feedback, and then so will Carrie and Greta and all these different people. And I think that's what's super amazing about the group, is because they're all going to do it differently, and then the parent can pick and choose what works best for their kid.
Right. Really cool. Yeah, so that would definitely, I think, be a Facebook group that you want to go and like or follow. And then I don't want to forget that we're going to give 2 books away.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do one now. And what I'll do is I'll just close my eyes and go through the comments and stop on one. And that will be our lucky winner. So let me go through here and stop. Michelle, this is your comment that came up. So, Michelle, if you want to send our guest, Michelle, a private message, and she can get your address and she'll send you a copy of her book. So that'll be great. And we're going to give one more away before we close, but let me check and make sure we've had seen everybody's comments. Heidi has a good question. Heidi is from Utah, and she said, can our children's teachers join the 100% inclusion page?
Absolutely. We have a lot of teachers on there. Yeah.
So yeah, so that'd be good, Heidi. You could give that as another resource for your daughter's teachers. And Gracie said, do you and other parents wish schools would host school safety for children with special needs meeting, or if there could be a group about that?
School safety. Definitely you should talk about that at your IEP meetings, what the processes are. I'm not sure if that's where you're going with it. But the team does need to know for sure. Like for instance, if there's super huge loud noises and screaming and yelling, Raymond is going to shut down. He is going to stay right there, which in itself is a huge issue. On the other hand, he's not going to run away, so that's good too. But the team needs to know that. And so they need to pass that information on to the other teachers. So they know that Raymond's got to be scooped up and taken with, or he will be left behind. So I'm not sure if that's what your question was regarding, but absolutely.
Yeah. So Gracie, if she wasn't, hitting exactly what you were asking, let us know in the comments. I think with the reality of more schools having to do like lockdown drills, that's something I think that you do want to talk to your IEP team about if there needs to be some accommodations around that. Just like, for years we've done that with fire drills for kids that, it's way too loud and too sensitive, and there'll be an accommodation that their class can, line up and go outside first for the fire drill.
Have warnings. That's absolutely, you can ask for that too. Your child does not need to be surprised.
Right. And Gracie said yes, that your comment was right on target. So there you go. And Anne says also that that's a concern that she's had too.
We always knew about every fire drill. We still do. Yes.
Right.
Our kids don't have to be overwhelmed and surprised. They can plan for that sensory issue because it's a huge sensory issue for Raymond. So
right.
Right.
Oh, I know. So we're almost at the top of the hour here. I wanted to show a picture of Michelle's family because we never got that up. So Michelle, do you want to tell us about this lovely event?
Yes, that's my oldest son, Stefan, in the middle with his, as Raymond calls her, his new sister. So my 3 boys and Jen, my daughter-in-law, and then this was 2 years ago, last month. So.
How fun. So yes, the families expand, don't they? And the other thing that I wanted to share, if you can see this well enough, Michelle, if you can read this quote first, because I know I've seen this on Facebook and parents really relate to it.
Yeah, especially true for me. I think the hardest part of having a child with a delay of any kind is the fight for services, the fight for people to understand who your child is and what they need, the fight for knowledge, because knowledge is power, and the quiet fight you have within yourself, wondering if you've left no stone unturned. Yeah. And it's hard some days, some months, some years. I think that it's all an up and down. We all go through it, and just keep doing as much as you can. That's all you can do. So.
Right. And thankfully, we have supportive groups like Michelle's Facebook group and also resources like her book. So before we leave, I want to give another copy of Michelle's book away. So I am going to close my eyes and scroll. And the next winner is Gracie. How cool. So Gracie, again, if you can give Michelle a private message and give her your address, and she will get that book out to you. So Michelle, I want to thank you so much. We've been kind of friends on Facebook, so it's always nice when I can actually get to meet, even though it's still a virtual meeting.
One of these days we'll be in the same room.
I know. So I appreciate all that you do for families and your advocacy that you are out there as a disability rights activist and making change not only for Raymond, but for so many other families. So thank you so much for what you do. And also for Raymond being in our communities, right? And showing others the value that our kids have. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I want to let our viewers know that next Thursday, I will be doing a Facebook Live, and we're going to be talking about the ugly truths of progress reports. This is a time of year when you start getting your progress reports, and so we're going to be looking at and revealing some facts about progress reports and what you can do to make sure that you get more meaningful progress reports. So next Thursday, we'll be live with that. And I am Charmaine Tanner from Collaborative Special Education Advocacy. And I thank you for being with us today. And please know if you watch the replay, you can still add comments and questions, and we will come back. And for Michelle and myself, I wish you a wonderful day, and we shall see you next week. So take care.